Hello, it is Tara Boothby, and we are doing a little series on positive view of self, positive view of others. Why does it feel negative to try and feel positive about who we are? The first video, I talked about trauma and abuse and how that influences or impacts our negative view of self. The events that we experience definitely impact the thoughts and feelings we have about who we are. Now, why is it so important that we're talking about positive view of self? So the benefits of having a relationship with our own self, where we can see that we are flawed and fabulous, we are whole people who are wholly loved, is that we can start to navigate and understand, to hear our own story and see our unique experience as something that we can embrace. We want to see our uniqueness, our own fingerprint on the world around us, and know that what is good and what is bad, what has been traumatic, what has been abuse, what has not been good for us is still a part of our unique fingerprint and our existence on this planet. And that we can feel positive, even though some things are flawed, some things are bad. The bad and the good are part of our positive identity. As well, with positive view of self, we're better able to reach out for help. We're better able to reach out for love. We're better able to reach out in love and give love. We're better able to reach in and give love. We're better able to reach in and give ourselves help. We can advocate for ourselves. We can advocate for others. So positive view of self really gives us a view or a voice in and a voice out with other people. And then, I'm always sort of curious about the spiritual implications, because I think the more positive we feel inside, actually, the more we can have a sort of sense of spiritual self and a deeper communication with the world around us and the universe and God, if that's a word that's comfortable for you. The other thing with positive view of self is to have an integrated positive view of others. So integrated, is this authentic. Like when I know I'm a whole person, wholly loved, I can have a more authentic, positive view of others. So when we do love others or see others more positively than we view ourselves, something is insincere, it is incongruent. So then I beg to wonder, is like, do I really feel positive about that other person if I don't feel positive about me? I'm of the mind that I don't. So the more I feel positive on the inside, the better able I am to authentically move into a positive view of others, a reciprocalness, an interdependence where we can volley love back and forth. I am a whole person, wholly loved, so I can better trust that you are a whole person, wholly loved. So again, we talked about trauma and abuse last time. One of the other really important pieces to understand about what influences our negative view of self is, and the language here, so one of the words is made up, but I still like this language. It works for me. It's just a category of breaking down those instances that impact our negative view of self that are not necessarily abuses. So the three categories, and then the solution I'm going to speak about is shaming, laming, and blaming. So I'll probably go shaming, blaming, laming. But laming isn't really a word, but when we get to it, it'll make sense. So shaming makes sense. Shame is something that we give a lot of attention to, as we should, but sometimes we don't talk about some of these other words that are also important, and these other words might fit better for you. So what is shaming? Shaming is giving action to the word shame. Shaming is the expression of causing someone else to feel less than you. If you or somebody has endured shaming, somebody has come along and they have, in difficult instances, moments of activation, of dysregulation, a person has come along and their reaction has to make you feel less than them. Or perhaps in moments of dysregulation, you have reacted to somebody else by making them feel less than you. The difference between abuse and a negative pattern of communication might just be this, is that behind a negative pattern of communication, we almost always can find the root of positive intention. Behind abuses, I don't even think it's safe to try and figure out what the good intention is behind abuse. But behind shame, there's potential that the person who is casting shame on somebody else actually has some positive intention. And parents tend to use shame to try and help their child correct their behavior. On the continuum of shame, it might be easier when we're working with some parents to say, okay, here's the shaming pattern. And the parent more readily is like, oh, this is what I'm actually trying to get at with my child. This is my good intention. I don't want them to be harmed. I don't want them to fight with their friends. I don't want them to, all these things. So the more accessible, responsive, and emotionally engaged a parent is, or anybody, the better able they are going to be able to see their negative pattern of communication, like shaming. And the better able they're going to be able to understand how that's rooted in their negative view of self and how they can strategize more into a positive view of self. We'll get to when we come to the solution for the shaming, blaming, and laming. Blaming, again, is an action tendency of blame, and which blame is kind of just an action tendency on its own, hey? But for the purpose, shaming, blaming, laming kind of goes. Blaming is removing responsibility, putting all responsibility on somebody else. Bad thing happens and it's all your fault. Who's the bad guy? It's a blaming thing. And just like I talked about with shaming, the more accessible, responsive, emotionally engaged the person who's doing the blaming is, the more quickly they can discover why that negative pattern of communication is there, what the roots are, and hopefully develop strategies to move away from that behavior into a more authentic way of reaching out. If you've been blamed, you've endured blaming, then another person has made you responsible for whatever has gone on. If you are the one blaming, you're making somebody else the sole responsibility for whatever's going on. Laming. So laming, it's not a real word. We used to say, oh, that's so lame or whatever in the 90s, probably the 80s. We don't really say that anymore. Lame in an actual tendency would be more something that we might hear in an equestrian environment or farm environment, a lame animal. So an animal that's been injured and they can't quite function. It's a great sort of visual, right? So laming is like taking a beautiful horse and the injury just makes them not function. So the lame animal, when an event is lamed, there's a dismissing, there is a removal of responsibility. So laming, it can happen in 3 categories. So sometimes my laming is like, I just dismiss, that's not what happened. So for some, blaming is, I will remove all of my fault. For some, I will remove all of your fault. Oh, you didn't mean it that way. In some instances, we both will. So it's a way of dismissing the event, the emotion, the damage that's been done. It's a way of poo-pooing. It can be done in, many ways, to just shine up and move on, to fake good, to martyr, whatever it is. But laming is just this different tactic. We're not looking for the bad guy. We're not trying to make somebody feel really bad. We're trying to help somebody not to feel bad, whether that's me or the person or the us. And so it's a curious one because we do a lot, and sometimes it's just like a way of trying to be nice or make nice. But again, there's no reconciliation, there's no repair if shame goes unaddressed, if blame goes unaddressed, and if blaming goes unaddressed. So what do we do? Oh my word, here comes the solution. It's a suggestion, not a solution. I'm an experiential attachment focused clinician. I don't really give solutions. I give information that you can marinate on and discover for yourself. So if you see, some of the ways that the trauma made sense for you and how that impacted your negative view of self and the abuses that you might have endured and how that made sense of your negative view of self, and you're hungry for a more positive view of self. And now we're talking about shaming, blaming, laming. The category response in regards, in particular to shaming, laming, and blaming, I'll come back to trauma and abuse, is naming. So really with, again, Sue Johnson's model, she's a genius. We love you, Sue. Thank you for all you did for us, is explicitness. Explicitness is a really helpful tool in our communication with others and our communication with self. When we're working through a positive view of self, whether we might shame, blame, or lame ourselves, actually what we want to get good at is naming things for ourselves. So if I am prone to blaming myself, like, oh, you're such an idiot, why did you do that? Everybody thinks you're a piece of shit. I can step into a place of explicitness and name things. So with anxiety, in the past, I've done vlogs on, play the tape of the day. I look for the event, what happened, I can think about it, and I can start a conversation with myself. I can talk clearly, I can be explicit and name the actual things that happen, and I can be explicit. You know what, Tara, when you were talking to that cashier, you did have a tone. You know, you tried to make a joke, and I think you used sarcasm. I don't think that person understood it. I can start to be explicit with myself without trying to shame myself, blame myself, or lame it. And the more explicit I am with me, just going through the details of what might have happened and the details of what might have been my contribution to a fatal flaw in a relationship, the better able I am to understand that mistakes are only wrong if we don't learn from them. I am flawed and fabulous. I'm not going to get it right all the time. I've made mistakes in my past. I'll make mistakes in my future. My positive self, my positive view of self is in my present. And my positive view of self in my present can look back on what felt like a negative view, what felt like a very hopeless place in my own personhood. And my positive view of self can speak to those very hopeless, painful spots, to be explicit, to name those things that went on, and to help those pieces recover so that they know that they belong in this whole person who is wholly loved. And this positive view of self, this whole person who is wholly loved, can look forward to that future self and say, hey, baby, when you fuck it all up, I got your back, because I do. And that's some of the goal of this positive view of self. Sorry, I swear sometimes. I hope it's not too much. It's just a sprinkle of reality. Okay. So shaming, blaming. Shaming, causing someone else to feel less than. Blaming, causing someone else to believe that it's their responsibility. Blaming, nobody's responsible. And naming is really this positive view of self tactic of making things explicit, sitting in the truth. What is the truth? We want to get as close to the truth for ourselves as possible. As well, when we are navigating our positive view of self and naming the truth, it is good to test the truth against a community of saints, I'll say. That's a spiritual way of expressing it. But those people who are wise and good, those people who are not going to lie to us, those people who are actually equipped and who care enough about us to tell us what is great about us and what is not so great about us. So we want to talk to people about the things we're trying to discover about ourselves with people who are going to be honest with us. That's where therapy is a great thing. I'm a big fan of experiential attachment focused therapy, emotionally focused therapy, circle of security, internal family systems, EMDR. Mostly important is to find a therapist that you feel is emotionally healthy and that you feel that you can connect and have rapport with. There's one more piece to this 3-part series. So peace and love. We're done with number 2. And I'll see you next time. I'll be wearing the same outfit because I'm actually just going to video it right now.